Hello friends, today we're going to be talking about North Node Rahu and South Node Ketu and how they're going to be changing signs on July 28th, where the head of the dragon will be moving into the sign of Aquarius and the tail of the dragon into the sign of Leo. And they will be staying there for about the next 18 and a half months. So this is where we're going to have all of the eclipses, although we're still going to have some Pisces, Virgo eclipses, but now we're making the transition into Leo and Aquarius. And whenever we have a change with the nodes, there's tremendous amount of curiosity with people. They want to know what's going to happen to my life. Because we know that the eclipses are always denoting some sort of a death, birth, ending, and new beginning. They're very dramatic because they are the agents of transformation, chaos, and very unpredictable changes. But what I want to do in this video is to take the symbolism of the nodes and examine them in these signs. I want us to understand what the nodes are actually doing. Even though they're so unpredictable, they do have these specific symbols behind them. And from that, we can understand this process that we'll be beginning and going through it for the next 18 and a half months. And I don't want to spend this video telling you guys what specifically is going to happen into your life. And that's because I don't know your natal charts. Any astrologer who sits and tells you this is what's going to happen into your life, you have to take that with a grain of salt. Because we don't know the planetary interactions. Where is the sign of Leo and Aquarius sitting? What aspects are being made in your chart? Or what planetary periods are you living through? All of these factors are tremendously important in getting a good understanding of what that means in your life. But we can look at the nodes in a general term, in terms of what is it that they're changing. In general, they're representing the way our consciousness is changing. And the themes of it belong to the sign of Aquarius and Leo. And in your birth chart, pay attention to the houses where the sign of Leo and Aquarius is sitting. It's talking about the themes of that house. So what I'm going to do in this video is briefly go over the signs and what they're representing, and then bring the symbolism of Rahu North Node and Ketu South Node, and then bring all the layers together so that we'll see what we're talking about. And before going through the layers of this video, I do want to let you know about what's coming up in August. And oh my God, August is hectic. As a matter of fact, it's so busy that I was talking to one of my dear students and I was asking her, how do you think I should organize myself? Because usually, I'll show you guys. Usually, like for example, the month of July only had this many transits, one page. Now we're going into August and the entire thing got 27 transits. I was like, how on earth am I going to do all of this? So I'm actually trying to group things together so a multitude of things can be in the same video. And those videos will be coming up soon. And if you want to catch them, please do remember to subscribe, press that notification bell so YouTube notifies you when the videos are released. And now let's start with the first layer of our topic today, which is going to be about the sign of Leo and Aquarius. And we have to understand what the signs are about to understand, well, what are the nodes going to do in that sign? And I want to start with Leo. And if we just pay attention to life in general, what constitutes as a living system, all of the parts of that system are organizing themselves around some core principles. So there's a center that gradually organizes that organism and what constitutes as its life. And I'm not just talking about the human body or an animal body or vegetation. I'm even talking about the solar system because the sun is in the center and it becomes the organizing principle of the solar system and all the other planets that orbit it. In terms of our self, what constitutes as a self, we're talking about a center of being where countless experiences of life is now orbiting it, which comes to define what the self is, or at least the way that we understand ourselves. So without a center, there's no organizing principle. And without an organizing principle, the parts cannot come together to constitute it as some sort of a form that can now have an expression of itself. And this is precisely what Leo symbolizes at its core. And we could say that Leo represents the center of consciousness itself. So Leo in itself can be seen as the organizing principle, especially with the sun as its ruler too. But what I want us to realize, whatever originates from the center doesn't remain internal within the center. Because if you think about everything that's internal to ourselves, it always somehow comes to have an external expression of it. Like for instance, every thought that occurs within us eventually becomes our words, which we articulate externally. Our internal decisions become our external actions. Our actions in the world produce an effect that goes even further beyond ourselves. So every expression extends beyond that person, that self, that center that's expressing it. So what this is telling us is now the axis of Leo and Aquarius, because the existence of a center now is saying that, okay, if you have an expression, it has to go somewhere. It's going to the periphery and the margin, to that external aspect, and that is Aquarius. So the center itself creates the periphery. This is the opposing sign from the sign of Leo. So if Leo is representing a center where consciousness can emanate and express itself externally, Aquarius becomes the periphery where it receives this expression of the center. Aquarius is where our externalized actions now have to encounter reality. And I want you to remember Aquarius is the sign of Saturn. Saturn represents reality. It's the way our ideas have to come and intersect with the world to meet the world beyond ourselves. And the way that we impact it is the way our choices and the way that we communicate actually has an effect on other people. Like Aquarius is showing us how life is continually reflecting the information that it gets. This is the nature of reality. This is what we're talking about when we talk about karma, cause and effect. So Aquarius becomes a kind of a mirror almost for the expression of that center. And if you think about it, the Aquarius-Leo axis are talking about a continuum, which is saying something about the direction and the movement of consciousness, where it originates from and where it's going to land, and what that landing is going to do and what kind of effect it's going to have. And if you think about it, this is how our consciousness grows. Consciousness needs some sort of a feedback. And coming from the sun, which can be very egocentric, at least in our human life, that's how we can express ourselves. This is my self-expression. This is how I express myself. We need something to reflect that back to us, to project it back to us, for us to understand what kind of expressions we're coming to have, what kind of decisions do we make, what kind of actions do we have. That's what makes us conscious about who we are, what the center of this being is about. This is how we come to gradually know ourselves. This is also the dynamic of Saturn and Sun. Saturn is a great catalyst for the great sun to understand its impact, its heat, its light. This is the way the sun can come to moderate itself, not to burn other people out. In Vedic astrology, the sun is considered a mild malefic because if it's acting egotistical, it will burn everything around it, or if it's acting selfish. And the nodes are coming here for the next 18 and a half months to create some sort of a transformation in this kind of an environment. And another thing I want you guys to keep in mind about the sign of Aquarius, I know the modern rulership has been given to Uranus and it's made a mess out of things a little bit. It has given Aquarius certain kind of symbols that it's hard to negotiate with when you think about the rulership and the system, the sign system in general. Because the sign of Aquarius being Saturn sign, this is a very humble sign. This is a servant sign. So this is a sign that wants to make itself at the service of society. Whereas a sign of Leo represents the king, the ruler, the one at the center dictating things. So the sign of Aquarius can naturally take the rule of the sign of Leo, but then it gets distributed into the sign of Aquarius, into the common people, the everyday people, and the way that we have to work and grind through life. So it has this humble thing about it. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, I want us to understand when expression is created from the center of being, from the sign of Leo, it has a lot of power and force coming out. When it goes into the sign of Aquarius, it gets distributed outwards. It's not going to be concentrated in one center. So it's about distribution of power. That's why it's moving to the periphery and it's moving towards the margin. So there's a distribution of power. Leo is very much talking about vertical power. Aquarius is talking about horizontal power, but there's tremendous amount of intelligence in the sign of Aquarius. Because I want you to think about this. One person can be a genius and they can come up with something. But when you take the intelligence of society at large, when you want to get technological advancement, now your advancement can be exponential. And that's coming from the sign of Aquarius. So it does have a particular kind of power, but it's dependent on collective power. It can't concentrate itself to one person. And this is going to matter when Rahu comes into the sign of Aquarius, accentuating and amplifying everything in Aquarius. And Ketu, which is inward and silent, is going to start dimming those Leo factors of the charts, that central point, that vertical power. But let's just go through the symbolism of the nodes to see what they're about and how to read them. And what I want us to remember, I want to start with Ketu. Ketu South Node represents everything that's internal moving downwards. It's about introversion. It's silent. It's dark. It's quiet. And Ketu represents the body of the dragon. And I want you to think about what the body does. The body digests things. It incorporates things. It kills the differentiation of things because it's integrating them to the body. Whatever that Rahu's eating, Ketu is going to incorporate that because it's digesting it. So in some ways, Ketu is telling us what we have already consciously lived, what we have already digested, and it's become part of our configuration and composition now. So much so that we're not aware of it. I mean, we hold an apple and we're like, we really want this apple. This is Rahu. Once when we eat it, we chew it, it becomes indistinguishable when it enters our digestive tract and starts to get absorbed by the body. You don't know where the apple begins and ends and where the body begins and ends. This is kind of like what Ketu does with our experiences. Often, Ketu is described as detachment, but the way that I see Ketu is the principle of integration and incorporation. It represents the things that once upon a time we desired and were external to us, but we have eaten them. They have become part of us. So it's representing something about embodiment. So Ketu comes to be about things that we have experienced through repetition many times. So they become part of our composition. And Ketu can be something like our DNA. And within our DNA, we have the genotypes and the phenotypes, right? Or the things that are expressed, like our eye color, our height, our skin color. That's more like Rahu, the genotype. Phenotypes are the switches on the gene that are there but are turned off. They're not expressed, but they're there. They're part of our DNA. The things that we have already lived and experienced, our ancestors. Those are the DNA codings that are there, but we're not a direct expression of it anymore. Ketu represents something like that. And, things that become second nature to us can also be represented by Ketu. Like once upon a time, certain things need our conscious attention. But after so much repetition, we just do them unconsciously. So again, Ketu is a mechanism of incorporation. Like in Vedic astrology, Ketu and Jupiter conjunct, which we're going to have in the sign of Leo, when they come very close in their conjunction within 5-degree orb, it's considered a kind of a blessing. Why is that? Because Jupiter represents wisdom. Having it with Ketu, it's embodied wisdom. That person has that wisdom to the depth of them. It's just incorporated as part of their being. And if you've ever been with someone who's wise, they don't have to say anything. Being in their presence, you're able to see their wisdom because they are the embodiment of it. And the person who's actually wise are kind of unaware of their own wisdom in a lot of ways because that's just who they are. This is the effect that we're going to get with Jupiter and Ketu, but I'm moving far ahead of myself right now. But I want us to think about like this thing about incorporation. Like when you're learning an instrument, at first you're so conscious about how to play that note as a musician in practice. But once when you've done it for so many years, you're not even conscious of this process anymore. You're just conscious of the totality of the music that you're creating. Or when you're driving at the beginning, oh my God, here's a clutch. Cars don't have clutch anymore. But back in the day, here's a clutch, here's the steering wheel, the gas, the brake. So conscious of every component. After many years of driving, you don't even know how you got from point A to B. It becomes unconscious. This is Ketu's function. So when Ketu is moving through the sign of Leo, is moving through the center of consciousness, what we are conscious of, especially pertaining to the self, the kind of self-expression that we want to have, the way that we want the world to see us. So when Ketu comes here, there's something being said about our developmental process of strengthening this ego self, strengthening the sense of self that can have an expression is getting dimmed. But it's getting dimmed because Ketu's going through here and taking everything that has happened in the past 18 and a half years and is trying to incorporate it into the self once and for all. It's trying to incorporate what we've come to know about ourselves, how we define ourselves, how the ego wants to project itself. This is not about killing the ego necessarily, but it's about really coming to believe that I am that type of person. I want the world to see me as that. This is something that we should actually be conscious of while Ketu is moving through Leo. Ketu almost wants a kind of an automation of who we've become in the past 18 and a half years. This is a time where all the knowledge that we have gained, the way that we feel our own power and our own center of being, Ketu now wants that to be just part of our disposition, at least for another 18 and a half years when we get the repeat of this nodal return. So in this next year and a half, the theme is going to be less about how am I going to establish myself. It's Rahu that's gaining the power of what it is that it wants to establish for the future, because Ketu represents the past. Rahu North Node represents the future. Rahu wants to pull the consciousness from the center of being to the periphery, to the margins, to the other, to show us what the self is about and what it has become in the past 18 and a half years and what the next horizon is. And let's just take a little bit of time to talk about what Rahu will be doing. So if we say Leo is representing the center where consciousness gathers itself, the periphery, which is Aquarius, is where consciousness encounters everything that is outside of itself and perhaps, or at least it thinks, not itself. But it is where consciousness, as I was saying earlier, is brought into relationship with the wider network of consciousness, which is reality itself, the way that we experience it. So in many respects, for consciousness that's concentrated within the self, as the center of the being for the self, is only able to have a self experience when it comes into relationship with this external network, which is distributed in the sign of Aquarius. And I was saying our consciousness really comes to understand what itself is about in this relational dynamic with the other. And Rahu's job in the sign of Aquarius is going to be expanding the horizon of the other so far out that we, within ourselves, have to move so outside of ourselves to follow that horizon that is going to feel like I'm departing from myself. I don't know who I am. I have to cater to others. I have to be of service to others. What about me and what about my place? So Aquarius with Rahu there is making us conscious of the other. But as I'll come to it, this process of becoming conscious of the other is also making us conscious of who and what we are within our own center. Because Rahu in the sign of Aquarius wants to grab our awareness to the external environments. It wants to show us how we belong, our identities, that part of the sun too, that can also come out of the sign of Leo. How it's stemming or how it's connected to different communities, groups, to society at large, that is not coming from the center of your own being. But the reason why it's doing it, ultimately, it is for us to understand who we are and what we're about. Because when we're pulled towards others and we project ourselves with our ego, which we all do because we all want to be seen as a certain kind of a person. Like some people have this persona of I want to be seen as spiritual. Other people have this persona of I'm strong, I'm an athlete, I'm a survivor, I'm a victim. These are all ego identities. They're not the truth about the soul of you. These are ego identifications that we have about ourselves, how we want to perceive ourselves, and then we project it onto other people. And based on that projection on the other people come to treat us a particular way, and we want correspondence with that narrative. When we have correspondence, when people see us the way we're projecting ourselves, we're happy, we're content. And when we don't, we get angry, we're sad. So some of the objective of Rahu here is to also show us what this ego identification is by taking us outside of ourselves towards the other, where we're forced to project this identification of ourselves. In many ways, Rahu in the sign of Aquarius is becoming a kind of a mirror that just continually responds to the quality of our participation in life. And it's going to be through this continual dialogue between Rahu and Ketu, because they're always 180 degrees apart, between the center and the periphery, between the self and the other, that our consciousness can gradually expand. And where consciousness wants to expand is to go past how we've come to know ourselves and the other. Like, are we truly seeing the other for what they are, who they are, what they actually need? Or are we projecting our needs onto others and actually expecting them in the sign of Aquarius to be subservient to us rather than us serving them? And there's something mutually similar or some mutual components in the sign of Leo and Aquarius. And I was saying this in the last video about Sun in Leo. At the core of it, the sign of Leo is a sign of service. But the sign of Leo, the king, is at the service of God, the higher being, existence itself. Whereas the sign of Aquarius is a service sign, but it's a human being in service, at service of another human being. So if we want to subjugate other people to accentuate our own ego and our own sense of self, this is a malfunction of the sign of Leo. And for the human, the individual, in the sign of Aquarius, to be subservient to an unjust king is a malfunction of the sign of Aquarius. So when we have this, we need a higher consciousness of what all these dynamics are about. And this is what Rahu and Ketu are going to be doing here. So this greater consciousness, another word for it is our human evolution. So the question becomes about what exactly are the nodes evolving? Like, what is it that Rahu's trying to reveal to us that goes beyond the self? Or how is it going to do this? And let me just give you a couple of examples. To use a metaphor of some sorts, let's say the sign of Leo is the tree itself. The fruits that it comes to bear are going to be what's in the sign of Aquarius. The quality of the fruit is always going to be dependent on the quality of that tree. Or let's just take governments, for example. When we have a functional government, then by definition, we have functional people. A dysfunctional government creates a dysfunctional society. Or take a family. A well-adjusted family creates well-adjusted children, happy children. A dysfunctional family creates dysfunction in the children that they produce, and then they have to go through a lifetime of self-work to get rid of those dysfunctions. So the functions of the nodes right now, they want to show us this dialogue between the sign, that the vertical power of Leo is creating the type of horizontal power that's in the sign of Aquarius. The quality of the ruler will determine what kind of ruled people you have. As I was saying earlier in the video, the center acts as an organizing principle. It creates all of these internal dynamics that have an expression in the world, and the expression creates cause and effect. Like this access in our personal lives is showing us in the past 18 and a half years what kind of environments we cultivated. Because our environments that are external to us are starting to reflect back of how we participated in it. It's going to show us what kind of people we surrounded ourselves with. We should pay attention to what kind of communities we belong to, what it is that we serve, who it is that we want them to serve us. Rahu right now wants to show us that what has manifested externally in your life is not an accident. It has emanated from those central points, whether if that is the government or if it's talking about you personally. It's making that invisible center that's part of the interiority, is part of the soul of the self, is kind of making it manifest in the world through the other, the environments we belong to. So in many ways, Rahu is showing us what the quality of the center is. And I think this is one of the reasons why so many astrologers are interpreting this as like revolution and uprising and instability in society, is because we're coming to see the inequality in society, how those who have claimed to be the kings of the world right now, the kind of world that they've created, the way the individuals in the world, in societies, are going to come into relation with them, rebellion, uprising, things of that nature. You can extract these kinds of meanings from this kind of a symbolism, especially putting Pluto in Aquarius too. In other words, the kingdom and the life that we built so far, especially in the past 18 and a half years, is meant to reveal what kind of a king is behind it. Because I was saying about the tree and the fruit. The quality of the fruit is contingent on the quality of the tree itself. So the question that this nodal axis is bringing is not just about who am I becoming or what have I become. It goes so much deeper than that, because this nodal shift is asking, what kind of a world does my being continually bring into the world? In so many ways, we are now being accountable for the world that we have created, individually and collectively. And considering that Rahu and Ketu are agents of change because they are connected to the eclipses, their aim for the next 18 and a half months is to change some of these dynamics. We need to incorporate some of certain things, to let go of our conscious grip of certain things through Rahu, so that we can move towards something that's more fruitful in the society and in our individual lives. And considering Rahu and Ketu are the agents of chaos, change, and transformation, I do feel obligated to bring something about our will and our agency into the conversation, which is about how we can consciously participate in this process. Because Thus far, it can sound like we can just be victims of circumstance. This is like a moment of reckoning that you reap what you sow. And we've all made mistakes. The kings of the world, I don't know if they'll admit it, but they have made some mistakes. We have made some mistakes. And coming in relation to the other to see ourselves beyond the ego and what we truly are can be a very painful process, but we can be an active participant in the process. And I want to talk about this for a second. And I want to say that, yes, Ketu and Rahu represents transformation that is often very sudden. It's very jolting. So they're moving us towards a destiny that's beyond our control. But every transit is saying something about this movement towards a destiny. But I want us to realize destiny requires agency and will, because destiny is bringing a particular condition into the forefront of existence. But we have to live and experience that destiny. And this is where our will and our agency comes in. And that means even in the face of fate, we do have choice. And our choice is usually this. It seems very limited, but once when you expand your horizon to it, it kind of makes you limitless in a sense too. And here's our choice. We can either let life take us wherever it wants to with its currents, or we can participate consciously in how we're being moved through it. Like you can close your eyes and scream the entire way, I don't want to go, even though it's taking you. Or you can actually remain conscious, remain calm, watch the movement, watch the ride, watch the things that come to pass through your viewpoint. Watch how life changes us through these movements, how our internal self and our internal understanding is shifting. A lot of people don't see this. They just experience this as anxiety until the ride is over, and then they need another 10 years of reflection to understand what was all the stuff that passed through them, how they were moved, how they were changed. We actually have a choice to stay with the moment, as difficult as it may be, to watch the ride, watch what's passing us by, how we're moving through things, how things are moving through us. In the next 18 and a half months, if we can center our attention and constantly be aware of where we're casting our attention, is going to save us a lot of heartache, a lot of pain. Like, take notice of the things that are continuously asking you to see it. This could come in the form of other people. This could be something in your community that is constantly demanding something of your attention to be seen, but your ego won't allow it. So just watch what life is constantly bringing into your awareness. And all of that said, also take note of the things that kind of want to be forgotten, of things that want to change. They don't require the same degree of conscious effort and attention anymore. That's Ketu functioning. It's saying you've done it enough. You know it. The soul of you now knows it. It's incorporated. Stop making such great efforts to be this person, to continually just enact yourself in that kind of a way, because you need to have that self-definition. Maybe that self-definition needs to be let go of, in a sense of let it incorporate in you, let it become a part of your unconscious wisdom now. This is actually where understanding is quietly becoming your wisdom. Allow it. The more sometimes we want to hold on to our identities, the more we're resisting the wisdom that we have gained, because we still need to perform ourselves, because we need a self-definition that way. Because in the past 18 and a half years, certain things are so normal to us now that we actually don't need to live those experiences anymore. We need to follow Rahu, and where it's pushing itself past the horizon of our being, to have our evolution, in a sense, to let consciousness grow. And if you believe in reincarnation, you are incarnated in this life to expand your consciousness. And that also means now that we have to become conscious of how Rahu's pushing us towards certain limits and past certain limits. This is how the nodes create chaos, because Ketu's pushing downwards beyond what is the limit of our understanding. So it breaks things from the bottom and can push so far out beyond what is in our realm of possibility that it can also break us by being so outward, motivational, aspirational, ambitious, moving outward. So we also have to be aware of what Rahu's trying to do right now. But when it comes to the healthier kind of manifestation of Rahu's, pay attention to the conversations and the human dynamics that you have with others that pushes your limit, things that challenge your assumptions, your sense of identity. The best thing to do right now is not to take it personal. Let other people challenge these assumptions of our sense of self. the right people, not toxic, crazy people, because they're another realm and mode of operation. But just in general, the dynamics that we do have, or pay attention to the relationships that are trying to reveal something unexpected, not to run from it, but to have a sense of curiosity about it again. Whenever you see some eccentric component of an experience with the other is coming through Rahu. Rahu's very eccentric, unexpected interactions that are very liberal. Like Ketu is considered to be more conservative, traditional, past-oriented. Rahu is very liberal and forward-oriented. So when those conversations come up, listen, be aware, give your attention. You're supposed to be there in that moment, not to resist it, and not to reinforce your past self, but to actually be curious about what's trying to crack open in you, where it's trying to take you. And I think one way to approach the nodal shift, this transit, not to be scared, in order to actually feel composed in facing it, is to not ask what's going to happen to me. Rather, is about asking, what is it that existence wants me to see and to become conscious of that I have never seen and I am not conscious of? To be a willing participant, to have a sense of participation in that process. And I think when we ask this kind of question and we use our will, agency, and choice to be participants, we get involved in the greatest project of our life, which is the meaning-making process of our life. And if you think about it, when everything has been said and done in this life, it does not matter what happened to you. The events and the circumstances are not the topics. What will matter, what will determine the quality of your life, is the kind of story that you were able to tell from those circumstances and events, which is directly related to the kind of meaning you could designate to it. It's about what that story means to us. And that's what's going to determine if this was a life well lived or a life that was lived with a lot of regret. So this is why this participation matters. This is why I'm saying we do have choice and agency. The world doesn't make meaning for us. We, as conscious beings, are the meaning makers, and we can participate in that process. And if you feel like you're going to be the victim of circumstance because something's going to happen to you, that's like the quality of that tree that's going to give fruits that are just like the quality of the tree. I think there's a better question to ask here, which is, how can I evolve? How can I participate? How can I see? How can I remain conscious? How can I direct my attention? And I think when it comes to the nodes, I need to emphasize this because they're so synonymous with chaos, change, suddenness of things, where we can feel like we have no control in this life. And that just biologically produces tremendous amount of fear in us. And I'm going to come back. We're getting to the end of the video. And before closing, I do want to say a couple of things. I'm going to come back and we're going to be talking a lot about the nodes. I mean, we're going to have that conjunction of Jupiter and South Node Ketu, which is quite profound. Sun's going to conjunct Ketu. Well, every planet's going to conjunct Ketu. So we'll be talking about that as the months go by. And we also have all the conjunctions happening with Pluto aspects and so forth. So we'll be talking a lot more, as well as the eclipses, of course. There are a couple of them coming up by the end of the summer. So that will be part of our discussions as well. But I just wanted to do this video to give us a feel of what to expect from Rahu North Node and Ketu South Node in Leo and Aquarius. And before closing this video, I would like to ask you to please share, like, and comment, especially comment. I want you to pay attention to what it is that life is asking you to look at, things that feel uncomfortable, the ways that you feel stretched. That feeling and modality of it is coming on. I want you to think about the things that you have outgrown. That's Ketu, especially as it comes to pertain to the sign of Leo. And look at the house where Leo's sitting. It's talking about the themes of that house. And I want you to think about an area of life that you're ready to explore, for better or for worse. You want your consciousness to grow in that way. And whatever that's coming into mind is coming into mind because there's a possibility now. And Rahu wants to expand that possibility. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, how you're processing and experiencing things. And if you want a reading of this transit, the upcoming transits, or if you just want to understand the blueprint of your life, your natal chart, what it says about your experiences, why you've had to go through certain things, how you have arrived here, what the possibilities in the future are, and what all of it means. You can book a reading with me, and for information on that, you can go to my website at parisayazdi.com. And when you're ready to book, just email me, and my email is in the description box below this video and every video, as well as on my website. And now to close. And I think one of the deepest insights in this nodal shift is a reminder for us that consciousness and the unfolding of life are never separated from each other. Because we can conceptualize consciousness as something that exists privately within us, while life itself is something that is happening out there, and we're trying to get this consciousness of ours involved in this life and to expand our life and to have a bigger life. But when we look at this axis of Leo and Aquarius, it's telling us when you're in Leo, the center is never separated nor isolated from the world that surrounds it. That everything that emanates from us, for better or for worse, it always gradually enters into a relational dynamic with the other that we do not consider ourselves. Even though we might all be living on the same network of consciousness and we're just these conscious nodes where we think we are the centers. Nevertheless, our brain is wired in a way that we see ourselves as something separate from the external world. So everything that we express, it comes to go externally and it has a ripple effect. So this transit in some ways is telling us the degree of power that you have and how you express yourself through it is saying that you are an expression of power, and that power is constantly and perpetually shaping the world that is around you. And the degree of your power is determining how far out you can go, right? That's why they say with a greater power comes greater responsibility. Your ripple effects go so far out and it affects so many people. You can go from one-on-one basis. The other could just be one other person in front of you. When you have tremendous amount of power, you're going out to millions of people. Talk about karma, right? And those ripples that go out will always retract and come back in, just like the waves of the ocean. And it's a feedback system. How we treat the world, how we express ourselves externally is going to come back in, reflect back to us what we projected to it. This nodal shift wants to show us how the center affects the periphery and how the reaction of the periphery is related to the center. It wants to show us how we are in a constant dialogue. So this transit is telling us the king is not just the person who occupies the throne. He is the organizing principle of that kingdom in itself. So if the values of the king are faulty, the way that he governs is faulty. So the feedback that he is going to get from the periphery, from the kingdom, from the other, what they are going to reflect back is exactly what he himself projected out. Like this transit right now wants to show us to what degree the kings of the world and the king within us has lived in accordance to truth and justice. Rahu and Ketu want to show us the degree of internal and external order and disorder that exists and how they are proportional and always in relation. That means the other is going to show us where we've been unjust, where we've been untruthful, where we have not been a good ruler. This is the dynamic happening with this nodal shift. So the nodes want to show us that the king cannot operate without its kingdom, and the kingdom and what it has become is not separate from the king or the center that rules them. So the nodes want us to understand how we're participating in making reality of the self, of the center, how consciousness is becoming conscious relative to others. It also wants to show us because Rahu's in a Saturn sign. So basically Rahu's being employed by Saturn in Aquarius. We're meant to see how the ordering of our lives has to have a correspondence to reality also. Both of Saturn sign, Capricorn and Aquarius, because they are Saturn signs, they are very much related to correspondence to reality. And considering that they are in the sign of Leo and Aquarius, they're also telling us right now, evolution of consciousness is not necessarily something personal. It's always relational. And that's because consciousness itself is a participant in the creation of reality and in its experience. And we have to consider we ourselves are conscious agents who not only experience reality, but every second we are in participation of making that reality too. for ourselves and for other people. So we need to be very conscious of what we're creating, how we're identifying ourselves, how we're projecting this, and the way that we project ourselves, and from the sign of Leo, and the way that we express ourselves, to be realistic in the kind of reflection that we also get back. And if it's not a good reflection, to be a willing agent, to modify, to become more conscious of certain things, to become wiser in this life. And when we understand that we are creative agents, that's the only way that we can become healthy kings in our own life and kings of the world who can create healthy kingdoms and societies. And this brings us to the end of our video. And as always, my friends, I wish you a beautiful nodal journey, one that continuously brings your consciousness into greater alignment with your reality, your hearts into greater alignment with truth, and your life into greater alignment with the person you are becoming. And that's it for today. Sending you much love. Till next time.